I'm here in Dallas, and I'm talking with my buddy here, Jackie.
Yeah, in Copenhagen, Denmark. Yeah.
And today we're going to talk about, it's kind of a interesting sort of topic of like what is the hidden gem in AutoHotkey that is there but isn't quite utilized as much as it probably should be, if I said that properly. And so this one, we're sharing the same screen we had from our AutoHotkey user survey. This was on basically, who uses what. So we can see actually like 82% of people say they're using hotkeys. So clearly we probably got to argue hotkeys is not one of the things that's a hidden gem because virtually everybody's using them, right? And even though this says, for me, 45% are using hotstrings, from talking to people, and a lot of people, and specifically Jackie here too, who did my Udemy course or our Udemy course together on hotstrings, like I know he doesn't use them actually nearly as much as he should, right? I think that's a very, very common thing, and a lot of people who they kind of look at them, but man, they are so powerful and easy to set up and easy to use. I still, this number says 45% are using them, but I'll bet you money on a daily basis it's more like 10% or something, right?
My guess is that I can't remember the exact question for this one, but I don't think we actually have the time frame on it, did we?
No, you're right. That's a really good question. It might have been in the, let me see if I can slide this up. I think I put let me see if I can zoom out some. No, I thought I put the questions right below it, but apparently I didn't. Anyway, there we are. The main. Okay, so please, below are some main uses of AutoHotkey. Please select the options you regularly rely on use in software. So we did have a little qualifier, but you're right about not about the timing.
Yeah, regularly. That's of course. Yeah. How often is that?
We should have said weekly or something. Would at least give us a hard.
Yeah, because again, with the amount of hotstrings that you have, and if that script automatically runs, you will have a harder time of not using hotstrings than actually using them. And
it's so true. Yeah.
Sometimes
when I'm troubleshooting something with somebody, and they're like, "Well, make a hot string for me," and then it's really hard for me to actually think of like a string combination I don't have a hot string for, right? Because I'm like, I can do this. Oh no, I have one for that. So for me, I put hot strings way up there as one of those hidden ones. The second one for me, which we see, web page manipulation or / web scraping, that is, and it's becoming more and more and more every year because so many tools out there, programs that people use, rely on a browser interface to access them, that to me web scraping is, even though like we just I made a video the other day and then we talked about it recently, the differences between web scraping and APIs, and I love APIs. When I can use an API over web scraping, I do, but the fact that you can automate interacting with a web page allows it's such a great skill set to have to open up so much manipulation of precisely using the COM, usually, the programming of what you want to do.
Again, we don't really know exactly how much people are using different things, or if their main focus is one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if people haven't used, let's say, COM for web scraping, that's a good one to really go for if you haven't done it before. But again, it depends on whatever tasks you have at hand, because you need to have something that you wish to solve, right? Where I was lucky to be in a position work-wise where there were a lot of interactions with web pages.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in some kind of other, if I look at one of my other colleagues, she only works in Excel and Word. Those are the only two places, because she's almost glorified typist, right? So she doesn't actually go into any web pages or any other types of programs per se, or if she does, it's something where the action she does is very um, easily defined, might be a good way of saying it. And if I had the tasks that she had, I would probably have automated some of those things.
Sure. Yeah.
I know as an example, they're using a program or a web interface to send out text messages to an amount of colleagues or residents somewhere.
Right.
And for that, they actually have, let's say, some information in Excel, some information on a PDF, and the last parts are something they just know. That's the same thing every time.
Yeah.
So these three things pulled together, and then she could have automated sending those messages instead. At one point I looked at it, I sat there and looked one of them over the shoulders, and the only thing that actually stops it from being something I could just simply automate was that they need to go into a map view and then draw a shape around specific buildings and stuff like that to kind of, it's the only way for that particular tool to collect which addresses to send the texts to.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
So you can't feed it with a list of addresses. No, you need to go into the graphic map and set those shapes around the actual physical addresses. And
it wasn't, it was the map wasn't in like a browser?
The map is in a browser. It's a representation of let's say Google Maps or something like that. But the issue is that I would not know, or the program wouldn't actually know the numbers or the buildings or whatever it was that it needed to draw the shape around.
Yeah.
That's kind of where the human comes in, right? So someone. Yeah.
No, all I was going to say was what I would consider doing is at least looking at the background traffic, right? Of when you start drawing that circle, you know, is it not documenting is not the right term, but showing latitudes and longitudes of how you're making the circle, and then basically, hopefully, all you could do is pick the center point. And if it was a lat and longe, right, and look at the traffic, and then all you'd have to do is pick the center point, and then you'd be done. But anyway,
yeah. But it's not a circle, right? It's a shape. Okay. It's a weird edged shape where let's say you're coming up a street, and then for some reason you need to have those in that backyard there with you.
Okay, it's a complex.
A really complex shape, and it needs to make sure that the lines that you actually end up having doesn't go across numbers that you don't wish to receive the text, right? So
sorry. So in this case, which I'm going to allude to a conversation we're planning for a talk later, and hopefully Jim Ford will join us. But you know, you're describing a little bit more about exactly one of the differences between attended automation versus truly robotic process automation, right? Or desktop automation is you still need that human involved in some point in every, you know, in that process. But right, you could automate up to there and then say, hey, do your thing, and then hit all right, go forward and probably crank out a lot of the rest of it, right?
Exactly. And the thing was that I, of course, when I had the chance to look over the shoulder of one of them doing this, found out that, yes, the interface actually does have a way to upload an SVC file with addresses. The problem was that those addresses came from one of our other geolocationing programs that doesn't have up-to-date address information. So it will return a list of addresses, but unless you use the other tool's map to draw the shapes around, you won't actually get an up-to-date list of addresses. So I almost thought it was possible to get around all that map drawing. It wasn't.
Speaking of which, the next one I would throw in here, and of course, which is what you're saying, Jackie, is it really a lot of this depends on what your needs are, right? But so one of my side businesses right now is doing real estate stuff, and so I'll get a home like I want to consider making an offer on, and so the first thing I want to do is get neighboring homes within a certain radius, right? And then actually go look at and say, okay, only keep the homes that have the same number of bedrooms, are within a 10% of the same square footage of the house, also within 10 years of when it was built, right? So there are actual APIs here in the US that will do that for me. I gave it an address. It went and got me, it would get me, I could tell it get me the first 15 homes, the closest 15 homes, or 20 homes, or 100 homes, whatever I wanted. And then it had information about the homes that allowed me to filter out all the ones that weren't similar. And then it actually had property values, but I also took that over to the Zillow API and pulled their data. Anyway, it made getting a comparison price for the homes around it like, a couple seconds instead of hours of work to try to figure out, or at least an hour, I'd say, for one home. So web service APIs, often there are tools out there that you can connect to and automate polling it's kind of the slash on the web page manipulation, right? If there's an API out there that you can just go do a query to, it's incredible instead of manually doing a lot of the stuff and automate that process.
I can't remember. I think I told you about this colleague I had where he had quite an extension or not extension, quite a extensive form with multiple pages and stuff
right.
that he needed to fill out, and he had all of the information in Excel, but the company that he needed to tell it to, they only had this interface, and it ended up being that after he filled out all those weird pages and drop downs and boxes and clicked on maps and shows and calendars and whatnot, he did all kinds of different stuff. The web page, when he actually clicked save, would just send it all as UL included text.
Oh, okay.
So in form format, right? Web form.
Yeah.
Very simple, very clear text.
Right.
Very easy to replicate.
Right.
Nothing really hard about it. But the thing was that he was using, let's say, half an hour each time he was filling out this form. And he needed to do that maybe a couple of times a week. And it took, I think we have had a 2-hour meeting where we sat down and looked over it all. And I took maybe an hour after that to kind of finalize it. And he tried it for the first time yesterday.
Oh, awesome.
And it worked. We already checked that it worked throughout that 2-hour meeting, right? But it took me 3 hours of talking to the guy, looking at it, programming while we back and forth, figuring it out, and an extra hour afterward of intense fiddling with it until it was there. And now he has something that saves him maybe 2 hours a week.
That's awesome.
Of actual typing. And
it's more reliable, right? I mean,
exactly.
It'll be what the data is. Yeah.
Was actually why he asked me. It was he had sat there and he was filling out, and that week he had to do 12 or something like that. And he was on the 8th or something. For some reason, he had typed in his private number instead of his company number, just because.
We're human. Yeah.
Exactly. It won't make that mistake.
Right.
So, yeah.
So to the general approach you described, that was one of the videos I made the other day, was just showing how often, even when you're manipulating a web page and doing web scraping, which as I said, I got a ton of experience in and do all the time, I lean more and more now to look at the web traffic instead of the web page manipulation, and seeing if I can just ping, send the actual API call of what's getting submitted or what's getting clicked, because wow, it's so much more efficient. And often I'm getting, of course, better at finding them, but it's just night and day.
Yeah, and it is really because what's behind the web pages is just an extensive API, right? So most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, it seems that the data passed along before being encrypted is in quite an easy to manage format, because that's just what the APIs on both ends expect. So all of that nice and graphically and put and ordered and whatnot in different strange ways end up just being a simple text representation sent as data.
Yeah, a structured data set that's easy to parse and to either create or to absorb, right? Either way, it's just so much easier.
Exactly.
So the other thing, and I wish we had, and maybe we'll do a different conversation on this, because some of these things are talking a little bit more about the skill, like an actual thing. Because part of it, which in one of our webinars, I forget which one, I think it was how to automate like anything in Windows. And, we start off, you and I, we discussed, we start off usually we see if there's a COM object. If not, then we'll see if we can send controls. And if not, then maybe we try like the ACC viewer, and then maybe DLL call, there's an order to it. Then the bottom is sending in, keystrokes and mouse clicks. And I think the two are related at today's conversation, and yet at the same time talking about which one I wouldn't say sending keystrokes people should do more, because to me that's the least robust, least one I want to go to, right? It's and a lot of people do it, don't get me wrong, I do it too, but I'd say like the whole getting and sending controls, right, or connecting to the Windows API, and also this is another one I'd say, is this whole the UIA and the ACC libraries, or lack thereof of libraries. It's a great functionality, yet we don't have really great documentation in library that leverage them. And if we did, I would be on that thing in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and that's most likely the thing, and some of it could probably be handled if they got a few more graphical interfaces, stuff like that, right? I know there is the ACC viewer, but it wasn't ever finalized, I believe, and I don't think there ever was anything for the UIA.
There's some that are close, but nothing like the ACC viewer is. Yes.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's one of the things that made IE automation so popular with AutoHotkey was the IE viewer, the spy there for that, because it was the go-to thing before all of the browsers got those developer tools.
Yes, it's a great little tool, right? It's so concise, and it gives you just what you need, not 8 million other things in the world. Right.
No, exactly, and it's clear, and as you said yourself, it's not too complex to actually use, where maybe the developer tools are becoming so extensive now that I opened it on that meeting last week with that guy, and he was like, what's that? What's happening? And he had just not used that before, and all of the information available there, and I've worked a little with him before, so he wasn't put off by the information that he saw, but he still doesn't really have a great idea of what HTML is, but he does know what, let's say, structured data is, or and the other day he was talking about XML for one of his automation systems at home for controlling his floor heating. He had, they call those small. I think it was a handheld thing at one point. No, not important, but still, he kind of has an entry level knowledge about the stuff, so he isn't put off by it, but he can't program or anything like that.
Yep.
But it was just interesting to see a guy see those developer tools for the first time, and of course there's a lot of information. It has something over here, it has something down here, it has the console there, it has buttons up here, it has tabs that you can select which stuff you want to see. So where with the IE viewer, it's much simpler.
So speaking of which, I think it was either this morning or yesterday, I forget which. I think it was last night actually. I was on a call with Maestria and we were looking at something, and I said, "Hey, let me see if I can use. I think it's WinSpy. It's not the built-in, AutoHotkey spy thing. It's the one that tracks like every event and I tried looking at it, and there was so much traffic, and I couldn't figure out a way. I didn't know what to filter on. It was just so overwhelming to me that like I can't pin down. I'd click it, and I'd see 80 things happen, and I'm like, I don't know which one it was, right?
And I think that just taking that lead to Windows send and post messages. Yeah. And again, here you have a 27.9% use it regularly. Yeah. And again, at least because when you look at the forums and try and look at what people post and ask questions about and which scripts are posted in the script and functions subforum as well, you don't see many people utilizing send and post messages per se, because if people are using control send or control click or anything like that, it is sending and posting messages on the back end, and the same with click and with send, and with you can't really have anything that interacts like a human would without it actually send and post messages. So that's just what happens. Like when you said, 80 things happened at the same time, because if you're moving the mouse across a window, every small movement will actually be sending a message to the window.
It was a real eye-opener to me. I felt like your friend that you just described when I first saw that, of the amount of things that are going on. You just don't realize behind the scenes, right, of the traffic that's going on. Just even not even moving your mouse, just sitting here, like the amount of stuff going on is insane.
Yeah, and one of the functions that I loved learning about back in the day was scan? As a scan, he's called. I think it was scan.
Oh, SKAN.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Who made the shell? I can't remember what it's called, but where you actually hook onto the shell and get the messages that the shell gets.
Yeah. I remember something with it.
Windows doing stuff. If you open, minimize, create, close, whatever, destroy a window, it is custom, or I think it's needed. Those messages are passed along down the Windows stack onto the shell, so it has information of what to actually do with those windows, show them, maximize them, close them, whatever the action is. Mm-hmm. So by connecting to that, you get all those informations. So instead of checking if a window is the active one or is minimized, you can just listen, because the shell will be told when that window activates, because that's just how that is. Or if you want to know if, let's say you run a program with the run command, but you want to know when that command has actually succeeded, you could listen to the shell and actually get the information. Now the window has been created. now that window is active. Now that, so like that. So even the built-in info, WinWait active and all of those use a similar functionality, right?
Yep.
So it's interesting to have those small gems all around.
Oh yeah. Now, and again, I think this kind of explains why we don't see so much of the thing with what you just mentioned, the send and post messages, is things like COM, right, exist now that are just on average easier to deal with and they work fine.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely, it's a great one to know, like, hey, if the thing doesn't have COM and you can't access it, let's say from the ACC library, then that's a great way to be able to say, hey, I can still get a lot of the stuff. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, if you want to listen for what other programs are doing, or if you want to get very advanced with how you click or what you do, one of the things that I remember using it for way back when was to actually copy the content out of a text control on a tab in the background. So the window was in front and a specific part of the program was the visible part.
Yeah.
But what was needed was actually in an edit control on a hidden tab. So because you could use a post message to tell that control to issue a copy command by that, or you could probably have done it in a number of ways. You could probably have used other types of control commands. But the interesting part was just that you could actually do those things by sending it the correct message, and it would happen in the background.
Cool.
Of actually interacting with it or having it visible, right?
Right. Yeah, which is obviously that's another huge thing. Which is, that's why I said maybe we should have another conversation on techniques that we should be using more instead of things that you use it for, right? Because I think it's a really good point. Often, especially new people, and even people who've been doing stuff for a long time, they do stuff with that are, it's on an active window and it interrupts, and you can't do other stuff while it's running. And I know from working, a lot with other people mostly, that there are a lot of great ways to do what you just described. Programmatically interact with the program without actually making it active, without interfering with the human doing anything, and it's just so much more reliable.
Yeah, and the hard part for us, or for me, or for you, is of course to know which AutoHotkey commands are not used by many,
right?
But who are that are really useful.
Yeah.
And I know that there were some tutorials back in the day of, let's say, automating what was called that music program.
Oh yeah, I know.
Winamp.
Yes.
Winamp, right? Yeah. Where someone can RaptorX perhaps.
RaptorX, yeah. AHK Toots on YouTube. So.
Yeah, he made quite a.
That's what I learned from. That's exactly the one I learned. The post, send and post, and the DLL call, I believe it did as well with that, or somewhere in there.
Yeah, but those two are so closely connected to one another, right? You could easily do a post message with a del call, but AutoHotkey just also has a command for posting and sending messages. But again, it's just structuring the del call for you, so you don't actually need to pass it specific types.
Right.
Yeah. Parameters.
And just to clarify, DLL calls, right? You're basically accessing functions people have created for a program, right? It allows you from within AutoHotkey to call a specific function that'll probably do either a method or has a property or whatever you want, right? So it's another one that I'd put it way up there of like, again, it's amazingly helpful, yet there's a lot of other tools that are a little easier to work with, so people don't probably use them. But if you don't have a robust way to do what you want to do, DLL calls are a great thing to make sure you understand that you can use them as well.
Yeah, and again, del calls, however you see it, and objects, and some of the other small thing or big things, how you want to put it, are probably the biggest things that ever happened to the AutoHotkey language, because all the big functionality, del calls were prior to actually COM being built in, and stuff like that. But those let you access the core of what Windows automation actually is. So by having those there is, I can't say that for sure, but almost nothing on Windows can't be done when you have those at your fingertips.
Yeah.
So
someone commented on a video of mine the other day. They asked me if I could do an intro to the Windows API, and I'm like, well, one, that's an enormous topic on its own. But even then, depending how you look at the Windows API, I view it more as just how can I programmatically interact with Windows and Windows programs. And I'm like, even if we drop out COM and say that's separate, I would still throw in DLL calls. I would throw in the Windows send post messages and the get and set of controls. I mean, there's so many things. Like, to me, I'm programmatically interacting with Windows, even if it's not quote unquote the Windows API, which is a whole nother thing, which is what you're alluding to, right? There's so much stuff that now that we can do that, it's just incredible.
Yeah, and of course, del calls and all of that stuff has been in AutoHotkey for not forever, but a very long time. But it makes the language so powerful that a guy like Lecticos, who fixes and does small tweaks here and there, and whoever keeps developing, I think one of the things is there isn't really anything as profound, or whatever you'd use of a word for that you can build into it anymore. Because when you have del calls, you have it all if you want it.
Yeah.
Because you'd need to build it into the program to either make it easier or maybe a little faster, but those are almost the only two real reasons.
And I think I was talking to Macerith about it, the whole what is the Windows API, this, that, and it was like, so many things are just wrappers like to the DLL calls, and someone has just gone and made a better interface, easier to use interface, right? That we don't have to go down that path to do them, but they're still doing those, because I was talking about like list views and tree views and things, that are in AutoHotkey, you're accessing, they're in Windows, but you don't have to, because he knows, Macerith does a lot of the tree view, list view stuff. And he's like, he looked into how to programmatically actually do it from scratch, and he's like, it's a lot of work, and yet AutoHotkey, it's so easy. Which it's not even on our list, but I guess GUIs are there. But list views and tree views, things like that, are just insane. They're so easy to build, right? It's incredible.
Yeah, and that's another thing, right? The level that AutoHotkey is still at a scripting level, right? I don't know if it's called the third or fourth, whatever type of scripting language this is. It's interpreted, and normally that at least means that you will be losing a bit of speed compared to doing it directly in C++. But all of the stuff that those people before us has made, like GUIs, that functionality there. Again, send message that we talked about earlier, where you don't need to make the actual del call and keep track of the types of variables and the types of parameters and stuff like that, because it's already handled. It was easily pre-written. So now you just have a command where you pass it those few parameters you want it to take. And again, the same was done with COM, right? The original version where it was done with del calls, most people were put off by the sheer amount of extra things you needed to kind of tone out to get to the bread and butter of COM. And with building it in, it became so much cleaner and so much easier to actually read and understand that was a great addition. But the functionality of COM was already achieved by including del calls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to throw, when you were speaking, the other one, Jay Maestri and I were building the script, and we added a couple calendars, and we're like, just the calendar and date pickers alone are so easy to use and create. And can you imagine trying to write like that on your own? Like it would really be like a load.
Yeah, because I read up, because I had one of my scripts where I had a big issue with one control when it lost focus, I believe, because it had been put in as a child of another control, and the tab stuff, and I think it was the way that Windows actually checks the control stack. I hadn't done it correctly, so for some reason, when it lost focus, it tried going over all the controls until it got to the parent of the one who lost focus. And because the parent was, and the child parent thing was done incorrectly by me.
Right. It was never there.
I got an infinity loop of a specific message already being, I didn't know for a long time until for some reason that it became unresponsive after being run for an extended period of time. But just the idea of handling that on a daily basis,
Gotcha.
I wouldn't want to do that. Yeah.
So the last one for me, I'm going to group them together though, because I'm going to throw together text manipulation with regular expressions, and I'm also going to throw that in there with the file manipulation / disk management. Because for me, I mean, some people disk management, file manipulation, moving around files, but I guess that is one thing. If you do that stuff a lot, it's great. But I was thinking more about the fact that you can, take files, merge them together, grab what you want, slice it how you want. It's not quite as powerful to me as Python and AutoHotkey, but it's once you start getting good at it, it's pretty powerful at grabbing exactly what you want out of the text, whether it's from a web scraping or whatnot, right? And manipulating it how you want it, and then automating that entire process is just, it's so easy to do, and it's plenty fast at it. And regular expressions are just a joy. I mean, other than you want to beat your head against a wall when you get stuck somewhere, they help. So they're so much easier than writing a complicated pattern matching stuff.
I would say regular expressions after. I think redx101.com, after finding that tool way back when, you remember the other one that you had used for a few examples?
Hi-Fi or Wi-Fi, yeah.
It was okay, but actually
didn't quite
finding an engine that was the exact same as the AutoHotkey one, and of course a bit of a nicer GUI with more information on the side and stuff like that. It has become not trivial, but it has become simple enough to make regular expressions now that I do it when I don't even sweat it anymore, because hey, I'll just put over the haystack in that box, and of course, because you have done it a few times, you have a good idea of what you want to put in the pattern,
right?
But still within through trial and error, quite quickly, you can have a pattern that finds exactly what you need, and you don't need to have a clear-cut understanding on every part of regular expressions to actually make something work like that.
Yeah.
And I feel that those tools combined makes it something easily usable, but something that's rarely done because people are put off by it.
Yeah, I would add on to that. I was going to say it's a caveat, but it's not. It's in addition to what you just described. Was at the same time that I was playing with regular expressions, and you helped me on this one a lot. I still remember the post. It was on using COM with a table. Walking the DOM and grabbing a table and iterating over the cells instead of. I used to grab the entire table because I didn't know how to loop over and parse each one. And so as my skills to better, grab the data, especially like also I want to throw in there with an API call, whatever, with JSON and XML, to grab those things already broken out, the need for regular expressions for me went way down, because more often than not, I actually could grab it on its own instead of having to parse it. But it's still, I'm not knocking regular expressions, right? It was just like, as I got better at the other ones, I used regular expressions less because I didn't have to use them.
No, and there are totally times where regular expressions make sense. And I had one the other day where the title of a web page, the one that you would see in the tab control of it, had a case number that was always preceded with a W and a D, and then an eight number string, right? So, and that was needed for whatever it was I was doing, and regular expressions just made it easy. Because instead of going in and saying I need something from the position where W is found and then 9 spaces out.
Right.
And I don't know, the numbers, at least at that time, were in, I can't remember what 8 is. Is that millions? Or is that more?
It was in 6 or 7, maybe?
90 millions.
Yeah.
Something. The case numbers were already in those number range, right? So the first number was a 9, and the next one I think it was an 8, and then so on and so. So, and I was like, okay, so are they gonna be 9 numbers long soon, or what? So I was like, better to just use a regular expression, because it can just,
you don't have to worry about it.
W, D, all the amount of numbers that follow until a space.
Yeah.
And it just works.
Yeah. The other one I'll do on that is just using a stir split on like the WD and saying, get me everything on the other side of that. And then the next one is sometimes you can use that directory path. What's the split path, depending on what you're doing. But there's so many great ways to parse data, right?
Totally, because I could just have easily have used, as you said, something to split it all on the spaces and just look for the one who had the W and the D in them. So yeah, totally. There's a lot of ways to do all of this stuff. And I thought about it with the file manipulation, and you mentioned Python and how good it was at it. I was like, I haven't done as much in Python as you probably have, but one of the things that actually put me off from Python compared to AutoHotkey, because of course I knew more AutoHotkey, so it was kind of like, this isn't what I'm used to. Is this better? Is this worse? So it was a lot of comparison there, right? But one of the things I immediately felt that there was a need for in Python was to include the way that other people had thought it up. And of course, it's the same in AutoHotkey, but I feel like Lecticos and Chris and who not, they actually try to give you the raw functionality as best they can. You know, they don't try to interpret how it should be done. It's just you have the send and the post message. The parameters come in that order that they would if you did it with del call. The only thing that's done is that all of the types are pre-filled, so you don't need to take care of them. That's, to me, it makes good sense. With Calm, building it in, it wasn't something weird like with what's the other web scraping tool you were trying to? Selenium, where they have all of the tools that you need, but instead of calling them the same thing as what everybody else online does, so instead of find string, they would have look for text or whatever. So
I get it. Yeah.
They just thought up all of their own naming schemes, right?
Yeah.
And I had the same feel with some of all the modules and stuff that you needed to include when doing stuff in Python. And I didn't like that. I wanted something that was more clear cut, might be.
Yep.
So.
Well, and like an industry standard that you can learn it and it's going to apply across different things, not.
Yeah. That's probably a good way of putting it. Yeah. So I love when I need to do COM, I can go online and I can search for how to do it in VBA or how to do it in JavaScript or how to do it, and it would look almost identical when doing it in AutoHotkey. Just because that's the general idea of doing it with that. And instead of someone like the one that Sean had originally made, where he had tried to give us the functionality of COM, but because he needed to go through so many hoops, the way you did it didn't in any way look like what everybody else was doing, because hey, he had that limitation there, right? He had given us the functionality and it was great, but the look of it was so different from how you would find it when doing it in other cases, other languages. And
I was trying to find this example, but I don't want to just like I said, I still really enjoyed the stuff I could do in Python. And then I was doing something in Maestrieth mentioned doing a stir split at the same time as something, I think it was the position, and made me realize how easy it was to start from the right and work backward looking for a character and getting that way. And I never combined the two. Maybe it was substring with stir split or something. I forget what it was. But I was like, wow, AutoHotkey can do it. It's just, it's not like you don't just say slice this. It's just a little more complex.
Yeah, and again, the developers behind Python, they've done like the developers of AutoHotkey. They've thought up something that would be smart to have built into the language, and then they build it in, and then you have it around, like we have with stir split or split path or whatever those different commands and stuff like that could be. Those might not be needed with the functionality that you have now. Stir split could just as easily split a path for you because it's just parsing on the slashes. Right. So you could easily do that with stir split or string split or whichever one of those that you actually wanted to use. But the developer at one point thought, hey, this is a nice command. Here you have. I made that easy for you. And that's the same in Python, right? So someone thought, hey, this is a great functionality to have when you're looking through strings or manipulating files or whatever.
We didn't talk about some of these things on here, and the image viewing, audio playback viewing, and video playback and editing stuff. Those are all, I think they're very powerful. Of course, it depends on your needs, right? Of if you have that need or not. The thing that Maestrieth built the other day for playing our podcast that you might see on our webpage, there's a script, an AutoHotkey, and it's something like 30 lines long, and he embedded the Windows audio playback Windows Media Player because it was a built-in thing, right? It was so easy to do, and it was like this. He has a list view at the top with here's a different podcast. We go and web scrape from the page, so it always looks for a new version, and then list them. And then when you click on the thing, it uses the Windows Media Player right in the same GUI window to play the thing. And I'm like, it was freaking. That's why I loved it. It was a brilliant example of how easy it is to. We did that in 15 minutes, the entire thing, and that was everything. It was crazy.
Yeah. That's another thing with AutoHotkey, right? The actual development time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. And of course, the better people are at a different language, the easier it is. But AutoHotkey is so closely connected to the Windows API. So um, let's say you wanted to do it in another language, whichever one it might be. I don't know that many of them. But if you wanted to do the same thing as something else, you might first have to build a way to grab and connect and control the Windows Media Player.
Yeah.
Right? Just that functionality there, where, okay, someone before you in that language might have written a library to do it, but then you'd need to learn that library before being able to utilize it, right? Where there, yeah, AutoHotkey is just, it is amazing at that. But again, it's not cross-platform. It needs Windows because it's so closely connected, right?
Yeah.
But the speed of developing stuff for Windows then also increases. So,
sure.
Yeah. Is that correct? The speed increases? Yeah, that's correct.
Well, yeah. Well, depend. Yeah, the speed for AutoHotkey, it's fat. The length of time it takes the second you step out of it is much longer, right? But yeah, the speed, the rapidness you can create and deploy a script in AutoHotkey is crazy compared to a lot of other languages.
Mm-hmm. True.
Was there anything? I think actually now maybe we did. I get remapping of keys, which I know it's helpful. I think a lot of people do it. It's it comes up. It's nice. I guess that's it.
Yeah, one of the things here, because I know people are doing it, and gaming is kind of a broad topic here, right?
Yeah.
But again, the functionalities of search for image or image search and pixel search and those. And one of the things that I've utilized a lot recently is the GDPI. GDIP. Is that
GDI, yeah.
GDI Plus library. That again, it's a user-written library that uses del calls mainly to actually do its thing, right? But the manipulation and the stuff that you can do with these things when doing, like you did at one point, try to automate something that was only represented as a plain image.
Yeah.
Like with the thing I talked about earlier, if I needed something to click around on a map that wouldn't have individual controls, that are just a graphic without anything to interact with, those tools are also a great addition. We both agree it's usually your last resort, right? But we're not knocking that. Like when you need it, it's amazing to have that there. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, because if we didn't, we'd basically be, out of luck, right?
Yeah,
we couldn't do it. So, and honestly, like I know you use the image search one more. I use the find text function that I found. I can create something in 30 seconds that will find the image and click it, and even if I want, send text to that spot or whatever, or do whatever. Mm-hmm. I mean, what other program language could you do something that fast, right? It's crazy to me. That's why sometimes I'm like, you know what? It's a one-off. I just need to do something here in the next 10 minutes to get it done, and I'll just say screw walking the DOM and using COM to navigate. I'll just find the image and click it and just put it in a loop or something. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, and we could probably talk to all the rest of the things, and probably some things we have forgotten, but yeah, I have looked quite a few times on the registry editing, but yeah, it's not something that a lot of people do, but it's still nice to do so easily.
It's nice to be able to do, especially if you're trying to detect if a program is installed or if you have a certain like .NET library or whatnot, right? You can ping the registry, or you could even update it if you wanted to. But exactly. You're right. It is super. It's a handy thing. That actually, the other one we didn't talk about was just the ability to save the INI files and read the INI files It's so easy to set up a custom file for your script to say, oh, let me save my settings, or let me go read some settings, right? And it's a great, easy interface.
Absolutely.
I guess that should be, I'm going to add that here. So if we ever do redo the survey, it would be a good one to have on this list, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, I think that was a pretty good review. I guess we're good.
Yeah, we might not have hidden any hidden gems, but at least we got to talk about some of all the functionality that's around. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, man. I'll catch you next week. To everyone else,
Yeah.
hang loose.
Yep.
Keep automating. Cheers.
Yes.